Hi there. Today we're with Joseph, and I know Joseph through a devotional that he and his wife Christy host on Sundays, and it's been really great to see them in Zoom and with other friends and reading from the writings and saying prayers and from different religions. And Joseph, today could you tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, and then we'll go into how did you become a Baha'i? And then after that, if we have time, maybe you could tell us why you're a Baha'i or include that in
Okay.
with it.
Um, well, I'm a professor of history, recently retired, professor of American history, with research and publications in American Indian history and national park history, all in the American West. That's been my focus of study.
Okay.
Um, but all my scholarly career has also been associated with being a Baha'i and with um, my journey, uh, seeking out the meaning of religions, spirituality. Um, as I was talking to you earlier, when I was 16, I had the opportunity to go to South America as an exchange student. And that opened my eyes in lots of ways. Being only 16, I had the chance to, on my own, to go to Cusco, visit Machu Picchu. Actually, that's with other students. But then at Cusco, I was literally on my own. I boarded the train and went to Puno and across Lake Titicaca at night,
Yeah.
and then took the train on the other side to La Paz
Okay.
because my family in Lima wanted me to see their family in Bolivia. So I had this opportunity to travel alone at 16, and I think that helped me be very independent.
I bet. What an adventure.
And I realized I could do it. But that independence helped me in later years as well. It also was surprising. I was raised Catholic, and my Catholic friends in Peru asked me how I could stand living with these Protestants who are all going to hell.
Oh no.
Well, of course, I returned home and I soon had a conversation with a very good friend of mine in high school who was Methodist, and he asked me how I could stand being a Catholic knowing that I was going to hell.
No.
So hearing from both Catholics and Methodists that we're all going to hell, which wasn't what I was taught in Sunday school,
Mhm.
but that brought up these questions of religion. And in my geography class, even earlier, we had talked about Buddhism, and I'd wanted to try to meditate. I remember that. Um, so there was an openness to other faiths. And then it wasn't long. See, I came back from Peru in 74, and the spring of 75. I was there the summer of 74. In the spring of 75, I was in a humanities class, and it was one of the best classes I had in high school. It was a history, but also art history class.
Okay.
And the instructor, my high school had this tradition of having a special day in the wintertime. They called it a Lyceum Day. And regular classes were canceled, and they brought in speakers from all over the community to speak on various things. I remember I went to what is it called? Um, it's bio something, biorhythms,
Oh,
the
okay.
session on biorhythms. And I went with a very close friend of mine to that session. We both got very involved in biorhythms after that. But they had sessions on Taekwondo, and I can't even remember all now. But one of the sessions was on the Baha'i Faith.
Oh, really?
This humanities teacher thought that I'd be interested in it, so she said, you should check that out.
Was she a
And
Baha'i? Or shouldn't I ask?
no, she was not a Baha'i.
Okay.
but she was the humanities instructor, and I think she was just very aware of other faiths.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so this friend of mine, Scott Herbertson was his name, we're still in touch. But Scott and I went to this session, and Jim Bowman was the speaker. And he explained very well. He had this graph on the chalkboard, which I've replicated since, of a staircase with different messengers from God: Adam, Noah, Krishna, Buddha, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, and then these new names that I didn't know, the Bab and Baha'u'llah,
Mhm.
which impressed me. I automatically, I think it resonated with me. It made sense, and as Jim talked, it all made sense, perfect sense. And this was answering my question about why these faiths, why there's so many different faiths and religions. And the whole idea of progressive revelation made perfect sense to me. And I think at that point, I recognized Baha'u'llah.
Wow.
I wanted to know more about the Bab and Baha'u'llah who are on the staircase. And it's like, these names I don't know.
Hmm.
I want to know more.
Right.
So we were invited to firesides, and I started to attend firesides. This was in Fort Collins, Colorado. So the firesides were up at CSU on campus. And I met a lot of the local Baha'is there. And Scott was going with me. We went together. And then he sort of got interested in other things, so he's dropped out. But they had a Baha'i Center downtown. And so I remember going to the Baha'i Center as well. And I was given the book Thief in the Night because of
Yep.
my interest, and that came up. And that's part of the story too. So I had the book and was put on my desk at home. Finally, after about a month of going to firesides, and I know I was at this must have started in March because I went to a Nowruz celebration. No, I think it was a Rizvan celebration, a picnic in Spring Creek Park with the
Okay.
Baha'is. And I was very comfortable. This is what I believe. And so I told my parents that I wanted to be a Baha'i. And they said, my father said, no way. We're a Catholic family. You're going to be Catholic as long as you live in my house, under my roof, you're going to be
Oh
Catholic.
no. Oh no.
Study the Catholic faith if you want to study anything. Well, in a sense, I did. I made friends with our priest. But my father started going to the more liberal Catholic church, I forget the words for it, but the church that helped or was the bridge for Catholic students on campus.
Okay.
John the 23rd. It had guitar mass. It was much more youth oriented. And the priest there, Father Jim, he and I became close. We started hiking together. And I spent a lot of time talking with him about religious things. But we went hiking together pretty much every summer. We'd start backpacking. But then when I graduated high school, I'm leaving a lot out, but for 6 months, I worked building a cabin for my parents, and they paid me for that.
Okay.
And then I took the money to travel for the next 6 months before going to college.
Oh,
That was
great.
my idea here, which was the best thing. I think every student should do that. I don't think you should go directly to college after high school.
I agree with you. That's what
Having
I
that year
didn't
off.
either.
And what I did is I went back to South America. And I started, well, in the meantime, when I came back from Peru, we had an exchange student from Colombia live with us for a year. When she went back, my sister went with her and spent the summer there. When my sister came back, she brought her cousin back. So we had this connection between families after that. So after graduating high school, I went down to Colombia to visit Piedad and her cousin. And then Piedad's had a good friend from Ecuador, so I went to Ecuador and then down to Peru again. But in Colombia, I got associated with the communists.
Oh, is that right?
One of my best friends, his aunt was the secretary of the Communist Party in Bogota.
Not what I
So,
was expecting. I was expecting you were going to say Baha'i, but the communists. Okay. I'm with you.
uh, so it is a lot of indoctrination, or not indoctrination, because I was resisting it. But he was a fascinating man. I miss Jaime. He was trying to understand history. And so we spent a lot of time. He took me to this very wealthy suburb, to this very modern mall. And then we took me to the slums and the ghettos. And then we went up Monserrate, um, which was this peak outside of Bogota. I don't know if you know it.
No.
It had a tramway going up, but the faithful would go up on their hands and knees on Sunday to beg for healing or for whatever. They would do
Wow.
penance. And so we walked up um, well, I had a girlfriend at that time from
Okay.
Bogota who was Jaime's neighbor. So we all went up there together. And Jaime wanted me to see this. Is this religion? Do you believe this is true? And I remember at the back of the church at Monserrate, there's all these crutches, which were from people who had they were crippled or had health problems, and they had walked up the mountain and were healed miraculously and left their crutches and walked out.
Okay.
And Jaime said, "Do you believe that?" And he really got me. I remember that very specifically, that conversation. Do you really believe all this? Well, I wasn't talking about the Baha'i Faith per se, but I'd start talking to Jaime that there's something else. We went to, he explained all this communist revolution and Marxism and how the world is going to end up being, the workers are going to rise up and it's all going to be this utopia, which I didn't see. This was 78. So I started talking about that there's other movements in the world. And in my mind, I knew I was thinking Baha'i. And there's other movements in the world. There's other answers, or there's others answers to these religious questions than what Marx gave. But I left Bogota and went to spend time in Ecuador and then Peru. My goal was to go all the way around South America to Rio. And in Lima, when I got there, I had contracted hepatitis.
Oh, no.
And so I had to come home. But I think that trip, that was my study of Catholicism. My father said I had to do, which was a little bit of Marxism, but is trying to grapple with these big questions about belief.
Right.
Well, then I started college, and within the first few months, I started dating Jessica, who was my first wife.
Oh, okay.
And the following summer, yeah. So that was this fall of 77. So the summer of 78, we went on a backpack with Father Jim up to Mount of the Holy Cross, just to where we didn't climb the mountain, just up to where you could see it.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
at
I've been
that
there.
point, and that's where I proposed to Jessica.
Awesome.
Uh, so Jessica and I were going to get married. And because we're going to be married, and I had my best friend, the Methodist who had asked me about how did it feel to go to no one else going to hell. He had moved in with his girlfriend. And so Jessica and I were looking at what we're going to do for housing next year. Well, we're engaged now. We're going to get married. So why don't we get an apartment together? Made sense to us. When I told my father that, he got very angry and threw me out of the house.
Oh, no.
Literally. He said I was not welcome there anymore.
Wow.
So I was no longer living under his roof, and was not bound by my obligation to not become a Baha'i because I was no longer under his roof. And by that time, understand the Baha'i Faith was in the back of my mind, partly because Thief in the Night, that book, that I had never returned it.
Oh, okay.
So it sat on my desk and I kept thinking, I need to read this. It was a constant reminder of what I think what I intuitively believed that was sitting there.
Yeah, I love that book so much. There's one sitting in my brother's house. I don't know if he ever read it or he will ever read it, but I gave it to him a long time ago.
Well, I borrowed it and I had to return it. And it was sat there and it's just like, okay, I have to return this.
Oh,
I'm going to read it first.
mhm.
Um, but that was really a powerful reminder, just having it there. But by that time, we were involved in, well, no one else said we were involved in drugs. Um, I never did much drinking of alcohol, but we started smoking pot,
Mhm.
Jessica and I, because Scott and my friends were doing that, so we got very involved. And so now we're living together. And the whole story, I'll just tell you the whole story. I haven't told it to other people. Um, I one of my goals has been to climb all of Colorado's 14ers.
Okay.
At this point, I've climbed
Ambitious.
27, so I've climbed half.
Yep.
But Jessica and I had a plan that fall that we would climb Mount Grays and Mount Torreys. And we got a little crazy. And before we left, we took psilocybin mushrooms, magic
Oh,
mushrooms.
okay.
Uh, and then left. We're driving along, going south from Boulder to Golden, and there's this car accident. It was pretty bad. I don't know anything about what happened, but I started thinking, what if I died? Um, and here, what do I really believe about life after death? And why haven't I done anything about what I really believe?
Okay.
Which brought up this core belief that I think I had, that I really believed in Baha'u'llah. And why wasn't I acting on that?
Right.
That was the night that everything changed.
Wow.
Um, and unfortunately, it was with drugs. We camped out in the car. We slept in the car beneath a rock slide in the valley by Mount Grays. And the next day morning, we got up and went up Grays and Torreys. But it was really that experience of getting there that
Yeah.
weighed on. Then we started talking. Shortly after that, Jessica and I started talking about um, a marriage ceremony because she was my fiance. We were engaged.
Right.
I'd given her an engagement ring. So we started talking, and obviously the Catholic faith was not that important. And she had been going to She was raised by her grandparents, but spent a year with a fundamentalist Christian family in high school.
Okay.
But she wasn't really fundamentalist. So we started talking about what we believe, and I told her about the Baha'i Faith. Now I can give specific dates because we went to the first fireside that I'd attended since 1975, since the spring of 75, on the birth of the Bab in 1978.
Wow.
I found out later that the community had just celebrated the birth of Bob, and then they had a fireside after that, which
Okay.
is what we went to that night. And that's important because I declared on the birth of Baha'u'llah
Oh,
a month or however many days, what is it, 24 days later or something.
wonderful.
Um, I was given a copy of Baha'u'llah in the New Era and read that voraciously when I should have been studying for my classes. Um, so I declared on November 12th. Jessica declared it shortly after that.
I was going to ask.
Then my parents tried to come down and talk us out of it because obviously this was wrong. Because on this was Thanksgiving of 78. And put it in context, this is when the Jim Jones Guyana mass suicide happened.
Oh, no. So they have visions of this cult and
Exactly.
only bad things happening.
It was right before Thanksgiving. So that Thanksgiving that year was very strained.
Yeah.
My father was very worried. Jessica's parents gave consent. My mom gave consent. My dad finally and I think this was, he just said Joseph can marry whoever he wants. And the assembly accepted that.
Not happy about it, but
yeah, there really wasn't. He was not happy about it at all.
Right.
We were married January 1st, 1979. That was my goal, is to have a day that we will remember.
Yeah.
So it's 45 years ago.
Wow.
Father Jim did a reading for us at our wedding.
Oh, good.
I asked him if he would share that. He didn't officiate or anything, but he was someone that my father knew who was a Catholic, and he was okay with me being a Baha'i. So he shared a reading. And we had other people read as well. We also had Pam Brooks played the guitar. So she provided the music at the wedding, which I found out later, was very hard for my family to take because she's African American. And my family was shocked that I think I had Black friends.
Okay.
So it was a shock for many of my high school and my family at that time, because I had become so different, but it's who I always was. I mean, because I realized this was coming to that fireside again in October of 1978. It was coming home. It just felt so right to be back with the Baha'is.
Oh, that's awesome.
That time apart. Of course, then I had troubles because now I was doing drugs, and the assembly worked with me very, very lovingly.
Oh, good.
I gave up. It took me about 2, 3 years, but I gave up smoking pot because that was required.
At that time, it wasn't medication.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because my father had blamed everything on Jessica, and there was a lot of bad blood between them. That really fueled this undercurrent of discomfort, and the marriage didn't last.
Mhm.
That we were only married 2.5 years.
Okay.
But the other important thing is, because I was in school at that time, so I started taking courses in religions. The college had a Eastern religions and Western religions, so I took both, and then a Native American religions class.
Oh, good.
And I was an honor student in anthropology. I was studying anthropology at that point. So for my honors thesis in anthropology, I went down to the Navajo reservation. I had read this article in the American Baha'i about the Khan family, and how I can't remember the father's name,
Yeah, I don't know the name.
but Chester and Franklin's father, how he became a Baha'i. And so I was very intrigued by this tradition, because he was a singer, a Navajo singer, and this traditional family had become Baha'is, and why. So my honors thesis was to investigate that.
Okay.
And I'd only been a Baha'i at that point for what, 78, 79, not even 2 years. But I had read a lot on the faith. And somewhere in this too, I can't remember the chronology exactly, must have been before that, I took a class on Middle Eastern history, because I was going to become a history teacher. So I started taking history classes. And for a paper in that class, I did a short history of the Baha'i Faith.
Oh, wonderful.
And so to write that paper, I read Bagliuzzi's hit the 3 books on the Bab, Baha'u'llah, and Abdul Baha. Read God Passes By, read from Strength to Strength. I could give you the whole bibliography, but I really studied the faith.
A deep study of all the history of the
So
faith.
that prepared me then with the study of anthropology and American Indian religions. Well, boy, I'd also gone up to the Crow Reservation, because my instructor for American Indian history, his adopted father was a Crow medicine man.
Oh, okay.
And when all the problems were happening, right before Jessica and I got married, I had told this other instructor in Indians of the Southwest, because Jessica and I were living together and we shouldn't live together because we weren't married, he offered me space in his mountain cabin. And we were sitting together talking one night, and I told him that I wanted to do a vision quest.
Oh, okay.
So I made a vow, and he said, you say that and you have to do it. So Rodney, I'm throwing all these names up, but Rodney Fry was my instructor for American Indian religions. And he put me in touch with Tom Yellowtail on the Crow Reservation. So I had gone up there and had done a vision quest. It was right before my first son was born. So it was for him, it was for my family. It's for all the problems that my family had.
Okay.
It was a 3-day fast. I did not know. My father was a land developer in Colorado, and he had an airstrip. And I did not know, but the day that I went out on my fast, an airplane took off. It was Father's Day, June of 1980. And the plane crashed and began a forest fire that burned basically all the unsold land my dad had.
Wow.
And changed the family fortunes forever.
No doubt. Wow.
And that answered a lot of prayers, because that changed how my dad responded to me. It changed his relationship to everything. And about that time, my brother became a Baha'i as well. So it was a very I'm sort of confusing everything, but all this happened. Um, but it also confirmed this desire to study Native American religions too, and to seek, and because the big questions that I had where I brought it up in the paper I write, my honors thesis, that there are other manifestations that we don't know of.
Oh, okay.
I forget now. Um, I think Baha'u'llah, there's a quote where he says that. So I was interested in that, well, could these be other manifestations?
Right.
White Buffalo woman on the Northern Plains, who Kevin Locke was very strong in believing was a manifestation. Well, when I went to the Navajo, see, I had all this language then, and this was interesting to me. It was part of my honors thesis. Because I had the language to talk to the Navajo, we could share a lot. And
Right.
what I really learned, and I think what the reason I'm bringing up, what confirmed me in the faith more than anything else, was Chester Kahn and his explanation of the Navajo twins, the hero twins, and his explanation of who they were as manifestations of God. They were born of a virgin mother, changing woman. But everything, we could talk because of that. And
Okay.
Chester is just a very, I don't know if you knew Chester Kahn, but he was
No.
very, I want to say meticulous. That's the wrong word. He was there very thoughtful in his speech.
Okay.
Is really meeting all these people. Chester Kahn, Franklin Kahn. I went to a Blessing Way. Franklin Kahn invited me to Blessing Way, but all that confirmed me, and just to see the whole progressive revelation. I spent time after that with Buddhists. I had a very good Hindu friend. I had a student teacher when I was a teacher who was Muslim. So constantly, ever since then, studying other faiths and having a framework through progressive revelation to put it all together and to chart a course of the future, which is what I'm working on writing now, is sort of looking at the future and where all this comes together.
Wow. I'd like to hear more about that. But we'll have to wrap it up for today. I really appreciate you taking the time today to share your story with me, and hopefully we'll be sharing that with others here in the near future. So Joseph, thank you so much. And we'll no doubt we'll be in touch again through our Zoom devotionals that you graciously host with your wife.